I'm not gonna lie, this is a weird one. When I began writing the script for this video, I had read only about half the book and was already getting chunky with sticky note tags. It was starting to look like a film script, filled with an actor's handwritten notes. This was actually my first time annotating a book. I always believed it was kind of disrespectful to what I haughtily called scribble all over a book. I'm not entirely sure where that comes from. My culture, where even books are regarded as sacred, as manifestations of the divine, or being admonished in middle school by strict convent school librarians. Perhaps both. All I know is I may have gone a bit too far this time. But looking at my copy makes me smile. And the rest is immaterial and entirely inconsequential. I thought I'd let myself just talk for a bit without really editing myself. Keep this video casual and conversational. It seems only right considering this piece of work, this video essay, is dedicated to the great and ineffable Clarice Lispector, in particular her book Água Viva. So she was this 20th century Brazilian Ukrainian author, or rather godhead, whose books were originally written in Portuguese, and this one translates directly to living water. Recently, I promised myself that I would not just consume content, but also create it, and that I would engage with a higher caliber of literature, not just as a reader, but as a thinker. This is what inspired this channel. So here begins my deep dive into the musings of a mad and magnificent existentialist, Clarice Lispector. There is much to say that I don't know how to say. The words are lacking, but I refuse to invent new ones. Those that already exist must say what can be said and what is forbidden. I can't sum myself up because you can't add a chair and two apples. I am a chair and two apples, and I cannot be added up. That right there is the core of Água Viva, a book that reads like Lispector's personal journal, a brief 88-page peek into her inner world, and to read it kind of feels like trespassing someone's private, enchanted garden. It almost makes me feel bad for reading it. I mean, was this book even meant to be read by others? Or stashed away and locked in a chest under a weird-looking tree with a map, pointing to its exact location? It's a book filled with quotable aphorisms, philosophical reflections, and at times startlingly candid admissions. Lines I was quick to take note of because they stood out so sharply against this backdrop of vivid imagery, meandering thoughts, and passages adrift between the coherent and the incoherent. It's a book that's not quite prose, not quite a poem, and reads unlike anything else I've ever read. And if I ever do read anything close, I will happily eat a 5x7 rug. This is essentially a stream of consciousness novel in which the author, in an almost cyclical manner, explores what it means to be human and perhaps suprahuman. If you like linear, plot-driven books with character arcs, look elsewhere. Here, you will only find flashes of reality and then a cascade of the imagined. And whatever is left is an introspection into the human condition, which her writing mirrors quite well. It goes up, down, sideways, loops, heads straight for the sun, and then comes right back down to earth. For the sake of bringing a touch of order and clarity to the chaos, I've divided this video essay into thematic sections. First and foremost, I would like to talk about her writing style. Well, it's peculiar. Some might even find it intolerable, because to them it might read like some sundowny nonsense. And yet there is something so fluid and hypnotic about it. Suddenly, the title, Água Viva, begins to make sense. I found myself developing quite a fondness and affection for her rhythm. It was like watching a newborn trying to make sense of the world. she had the same curious trepidation to her writing. Or perhaps this book is best described as a straight-up fever dream, full of contradictions and digressions, with Lispector going round and round in circles, with us, the readers, getting pulled along for the ride, for she cannot and must not be resisted. The word is my fourth dimension. Her use of abrupt, weird punctuation and sudden shifts in tone mimic the very form of thought itself. It's raw and alive. The book is rooted in the present moment, and every moment, in every paragraph, the clock resets, and so do the themes. They reappear, morph, and once she has wrung the last drop from them, they die. She said she wrote like fugitive tracks escaping the window of a train every instant, and even likened it to photographing perfume. She writes the way she does and accepts it for what it is, as it is her unconscious itself that is materializing through her writing. She obeys it without question, and she faces whatever it may bring forth. With imagination and a strange persuasive power, she is able to conjure up beautiful imagery, taking great pleasure in the magic and absurdity of the written word and the worlds it can create. I sometimes wondered if the visuals had a hidden meaning. I now believe they were purely for her and the reader's amusement. Lispector's philosophical outlook on life challenged conventional binaries. She proposes that the opposite of logic is not irrationality but instinct and courage, powers that demand respect, defy neat categorization, and which may sometimes go beyond reason. In her view, notions of good and evil are primitive constructs, culturally constructed rather than being absolute truths, an idea echoed by Nietzsche, whose critique of morality and power structures deeply influenced existentialists. Building on this, Lispector echoed and expanded Freud's concept of the death drive, himself an heir to Nietzsche. She believed that humanity harbored an intrinsic desire for death and self-annihilation. She experiences death not as a looming specter in the distance, but as the haunting summons of sirens, seductive and inescapable. She also held that suffering, guilt, and alienation do not necessarily distance one from the truth or the divine, but may in fact be the very path towards it. This makes sense because in Abrahamic theologies, sin is often a path to grace. The greater the sin, the more profound the insights and subsequent redemption. In romantic and existentialist literature too, it's often the outsider who, by virtue of their alienation, is able to contemplate the incomprehensible and get closer than the so-called pure to God. Her metaphysical explorations even extended to the nature of objects and wondered if they were halted time. Objects, in capturing a moment of existence or transformation, can become repositories of memory, silent guideposts between the past and present, whether one chooses to engage with these memories or not. Lispector had a recurrent and deep wish for surrender, to simply be and exist by God's or nature's will, living a life akin to that of animals, who, free from the burdens of human consciousness and illusion, in her view, were closer to understanding the mystery of God. In this regard, she also viewed all language itself as fundamentally illusory, a medium that couldn't be understood, and even if understood, could never fully capture the essence of life. And yet, she recognized a profound paradox in all this self-knowledge. To truly know oneself is to lose all mystery, to cease being a muse. This loss of aura and enigma can leave one exposed, stripped of the secrets that, in her opinion, are essential for the building of identity and creative expression. Time, for Lispector, is elusive, a mystery she approaches with curiosity, contradiction, and humor. She once wrote that time is made of joy, attempting to link temporality with human emotions. Her prose frequently plays with the boundaries of time, at times implying that it runs in all directions, and sometimes that it may not exist at all. And yet she never settles on one answer. Her meditations on time are fluid and unresolved, much like time itself. She was particularly fascinated by the notion of the eternal present, the fleeting now that resists any kind of containment. Through reading and writing, she seeks a kind of grounding, a way to stay tethered to the moment. In this sense, her writing becomes both a way of grounding herself in the material world and a means of transcending it. In one of her more humorous reflections, she wishes to be buried with a watch, so that even in death, something might pulse time. Beneath the wit lies a deep longing, not only for control over time, but for freedom, the freedom to move, to err, to evolve. The banality of daily life chipped away at Lispector's soul. She had little patience for its routines. Evenings and Sundays in particular haunted her, with their stillness and implied domesticity. In retaliation, she withdrew into her inner world of imagination and introspection, where she was unburdened by obligation or the expectations of others, a place where she could simply exist. Yet she also understood the perils of becoming too attached to this inner world. To create with passion and intensity is to risk being misunderstood and isolated. And to be exceptional in any way is to be vulnerable to people's envy and judgment. She was invested in the idea of potentiality. In alignment with Sartre and Nietzsche, she believed the self is always in flux, that one must be allowed to remake oneself endlessly. Only in time is there room enough for me, she wrote. Becoming yourself is a process that occurs to oneself, through oneself, and by itself. For her, the meaning of life revealed itself only in death, at which point there is no language, no sensation, no consciousness left to articulate it. Upon death, there is the end of all imagination, curiosity, thought, and artifice, everything that makes us human. And yet, in a paradox that runs throughout her work, Lispector describes aliveness as a kind of death, because life's raw materials remain forever hidden, while death is a kind of aliveness, because of all of life's electrified secrets are finally revealed upon reaching its threshold. Beneath it all is Lispector's confrontation with her own mortality. She lost her mother at a young age and had since grappled with the terrifying smallness of the human being, how little agency we actually possess, and how much of our lives is dictated by forces we cannot even begin to comprehend. She was profoundly mystified by these forces, this God who watches everything unfold silently without intervention or explanation. Ostensibly, her writing is deeply personal, yet it often transcends the self to touch on universal truths. Her prose is both cogent and elusive, demanding careful attention from the reader to unravel its depths. While her work may feel solipsistic at times, it's not true solipsism. Rather, it reminds us that our perceptions are ultimately filtered through our own consciousness, highlighting the subjective nature of experience without denying the existence of an external reality. What I write to you is not comfortable. I don't impart confidences. Instead, I metallize myself. And I'm not comfortable for you. And for me, my words burst into the space of the day. In Agua Viva, she lays her innermost self bare, and not through the typical confessional route, but through the stripping away of all accoutrements from the self. She is sometimes candid. I write because I don't understand myself, she says, a sentiment shared by anyone who has ever kept a journal or written anything down, not to document daily life, but to survive it. She is restless in her pursuit for understanding this thing called God and death and time, and she takes us, the reader, to the edges of language and meaning. Lispector wonders whether she is weak or strong for thinking so deeply. She lets the tension sit and eventually declares herself, born hard, heroic, alone and standing. She adds, to interpret myself and formulate me, I need new signs and new articulations in shapes found on this side and beyond my human story. At first glance, it may seem like an attempt at self-mythologizing, but take a closer look and see that she is only looking to anchor her identity in the constant flux of existential ambiguity that life is. Her prose dances between dualities, pain and ecstasy, time and timelessness, self and the non-self, with the poeticism that she herself compares to magic and witchcraft. Writing becomes a form of spellwork, invoking the five senses and stirring thought. She finds an almost childlike delight in conjuring up imagery and constructing whole entire worlds, teeming with flora and fauna, musty underground caves, heaven, hell, and everything in between. However, her delight is tinged with hesitation. The halo of her words both illuminates and distorts. She wonders, half jokingly, and perhaps a little fearfully, if she has been led astray by the devil, seduced by her own power over language. And like all of us who have taken their introspection too far, she wonders if she is inherently bad, simply hiding behind the mask of social virtue, the writer, the painter, the public figure. In her book, she seemingly relapses into her sudden anxieties, existential and moral, between passages full of whimsy. There is a gorgeous section in her book on flowers, which spirals into something more personal, as she imbues each flower with her own projections, emotions, and meanings. Lispector despises categorization of any sort with passion. She rejects labels and linear narratives. She wishes, instead, to remain elastic, fluid, ever novel. Her approach to life and writing could be described as autotelic, meaning she pursues activities for their own sake, driven by intrinsic motivation rather than external rewards. A final theme I want to talk about, perhaps the most important of all, is non-duality. Non-duality is the recognition that underlying the multiplicity and diversity of experience, there is a single, infinite, and indivisible reality whose nature is pure consciousness, from which all objects and selves derive their apparently independent existence. The recognition of this reality is not only the source of lasting happiness within all people, it is the foundation of peace between individuals, communities, and nations, and it must be the basis for any sustainable relationship with the environment. Rupert Spira. In the stillness of the mind, I saw myself as I am, unbound. Nisargadatta Maharaj, I am that. Non-duality or Advaita in Sanskrit is something I've been dabbling in over the past year. I had the realization that everything was noise. The brain produces it compulsively, layers of thoughts, reactions, and judgments. What we call clarity is merely more noise. Noise attempting to resolve itself through more noise. But what we truly crave is silence, not the absence of sound, but noiselessness. Awareness, the ultimate ungraspable dimension, our true nature, which cannot be seen, heard, or touched. It is uncreated, timeless. The egoic mind resists this silence. It does not like the idea of simply resting in awareness. It becomes anxious in stillness and would rather perform endlessly than dissolve. Silence is intolerable to the ego because it implies nothing to do, nothing to become. And this is where Lispector enters, not just as a writer, but as a kind of mystic. Her writing mirrors this very resistance and surrender. Her style of writing is like a Zen pointing, called a koan. She does not hand you answers. She points and withdraws, and leaves you alone with yourself to make you think. I painted the unattainable forever, or for never. It amounts to the same. I may not have meaning, but it is the same lack of meaning that the pulsing vein has. There is the matter of believing that all is one, and further still, that all is none. That first part will sound familiar. The second, perhaps less so, to those unacquainted with the philosophy of non-duality. Look around you. Nothing is actually experienced outside of thoughts. You cannot even describe what you see outside of thoughts. Your sense of self, your ego, the I, is a construct made up of a collection of thoughts since birth. Thoughts themselves being an appearance in consciousness, being generated as if on autopilot, out of your control. But what you are is not a thought. If you put aside all thoughts of past, future, and even the present, do you cease to exist? Of course not. You remain. You are that which notices thought, not the thought itself. And this world, including you, is a single indivisible movement. Your true self is like a screen, or as Lispector describes it, a mirror on which all of this movement plays out. Except, it's not even a screen. Even this analogy has its limitations. Through meditation and direct experience, you will know that it's an impersonal, dimensionless awareness. But paradoxically, the attempt to rid oneself of ego only strengthens the illusion of its existence. You cannot eliminate what was never real to begin with. There is just existence and no separate selves in existence. You are as much life as the life happening around you. In this way, all is one and all is none. This none is the true self. Here, none does not equate to nothingness. In fact, it's infinite. And since it's infinite, it cannot be fully known by the finite, conscious mind. To some, this may sound new agey and a bit too esoteric, but I do not care, and evidently neither did Lispector, as she, in her writings, let go of all beliefs, thoughts, labels, definitions. From that shedding came spontaneity, and from spontaneity, creativity, precisely what animates every page of her work. I believe Lispector was, at heart, a spiritual seeker, a non-dualist, disguised as a novelist. She understood that there are no ultimate answers and no final teachings. The truth must be lived. And once the nature of the true self is understood, there exists a state of peace, contentment, and stillness. And there's a physical bliss to which nothing else compares. The body is transformed into a gift, and you feel that it's a gift because you experience, right at the source, the sudden, indubitable present of existing miraculously and materially. In the end, Lispector allows us, the reader, to be ourselves. She does not preach. She models the way by walking it and invites us to do the same. She is content in the now. She is, in the truest sense of the word, enlightened. It bears repeating that Agua Viva is not a book one reads to find answers to life's great mysteries. Rather, it's a book that teaches us how to inhabit the unknown and to get comfortable sitting in its uncertainties. It offers the readers understanding and a kind of brotherhood with anyone who has ever questioned the world and themselves.